Hello, my name's Osha. I like talking about American presidents. Of course, that's my elevator speech. And today is Sunday. It's February the 22nd, 2026. I did an earlier video, and this is a supplement to it. That video was rather long, so this time I want to try and avoid editorializing. And so I'm just going to try and get into the Bible verses that I want to share. Uh, and I'm doing it for a friend and for people who have been wrongfully accused by the and people who are wrongfully detained by the criminal justice system. This thing happens, it happens. I had never experienced this before, but I've talked about my story, May 16, 2023. Um, Upstanding person holding a top secret TSSCI clearance with the federal government, working at the Department of Defense, Department of the Navy. I was a John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow. You could look it up. It's a senior leadership career track to be in the Department of Defense. And, and of course, I'm a lawyer, right? I hold a Juris Doctor degree from George Washington University Law School. Never been arrested, but I was falsely accused. The state officials fabricated um, evidence, false witnesses against me, complete fraud upon the court, complete fraud. So here I am. I'm in this situation. So if it happened to me, I realize it happens to many other people as well. Today's Sunday, and so I want to share some Bible verses to encourage um, other people, especially maybe Black Americans who have been wrongfully accused, and they shouldn't despair. Not everybody has the confidence, the character, the resilience to be able to soldier on in the midst of a false accusation under wrongful under while they're being persecuted, right? Especially if it's officials and like judges. There's a corrupt judge in the state of Maryland that's been superintending the malicious, vindictive, bad faith prosecution using fraud upon the court, and perpetrating procedural unfairness. And so it's a complete abuse, an egregious abuse of the process. So if I'm experiencing it, there are many other people who probably experience it as well, especially Black Americans. And this is to share with Christians, because I learned in church that there's somebody from my church um, who had been wrongfully detained as well. So it happens to Christians, right? If anybody who's a Christian assumes that, well, that someone can't be wrongfully detained by the law, that the police or even judges cannot corrupt the process and charge somebody, detain one wrongfully, and violate the rights of Americans and even undocumented people, well, then they're not Christians, right? I want to remind us of, Christians are followers of Christ, right? And I want to remind us of what Jesus said in the book of John, John 15, verse 20, right? Jesus actually said that that if they persecuted him, they're going to persecute his followers as well. He reminded of us that. Oh, he reminded us of that. It's in the book of John, right? You could look it up. Now, but apart from that, remember the story of Jesus. Jesus himself was condemned. He was an innocent man who was condemned for charges he didn't commit. He didn't commit any crime, but he was wrongfully condemned by Pontius Pilate. And it's ironic that Pontius Pilate, however, washed his hands clean, right? Famously, he washed his hands of the persecution, the wrongful prosecution, even though he was the one who presided over the trial and he was one who ordered the execution of Jesus. But he tried to absolve himself of responsibility by washing his hands, right? So and this is historical stuff. I did history of Rome in school. I did a history of Rome, and so apart from what's in the Bible, but the history of Rome tells us there was a character, a man, a historical figure named Pontius Pilate, and he was actually the prefect of Judea. Prefect is the equivalent of a governor, and this was during the time of Emperor Tiberius, right? So Jesus went to trial, and he was condemned for a crime he'd never committed, and he was crucified. So Pontius Pilate ordered his crucifixion, even though he knew Jesus was innocent. But there was a cabal that wanted him dead, right? So we know that there are those who are powerful who pervert, they pervert the course of justice. But God hates that. So that's what I want to do today. I want to read some more inspirational verses that show that God is against corrupt judges and injustice, and it should be able to inspire us, because these are things that inspire me. Somebody, friends have been mentioning about how brave I've been. Even my mom's been saying, "Hey, I've been so brave, I've been so courageous." That's the grace of God. And so I just want to share today. It's Sunday. I want to quickly share verses that inspire me and can inspire others as well who may be facing the injustice in America's criminal justice system, right? I'm a lawyer, and my reason, even though I'm an American citizen now, what I came for originally over 20 years ago, I've been in America 27 years, haven't even been back to my home country where I came from, right, from Nigeria. What I came for originally was to study law, right? And somehow God made it happen. I studied accounting and an MBA originally when I came, but my dream was to eventually go to law school. I remember when I told one of my professors who taught me philosophy and ethics, he was a judge and he liked me. I remember I made perfect scores in his class, and invited me to his office, and he wanted to know what my plans were. And I told him right away that my real interest was to study law. He advised me that I should, complete my accounting program, and when I had money, then I could go to law school. That if I, with accounting, my MBA, he said I should take the CPA as well. I never took the CPA. I've never sat for it, but I was qualified to take the CPA. He said I would definitely be a shoo-in for law school, right? I didn't take the CPA. When I graduated, I was hired by a bank, and I went a different path, but I still eventually made it to law school, right? In any event. So let me get to it and quickly read these Bible verses. I'm going to be sharing these verses. I want to keep it short. I'm going to be reading from the books of Proverbs 21, verse 1, and Isaiah 10, verses 1 to 2, Amos 5, verses 12 and 15, and Psalm 94, verses 20 to 23. So those are the verses I'm going to be sharing. And if anybody wants to be remember, or just write it down. I had mentioned how Jesus said, just for anybody who's been wrongfully detained, wrongfully arrested, because there are many people who've been wrongfully detained, and they talked about somebody like that in church today, somebody who's been wrongfully detained. um, you know if anybody's going through wrongful detention, they should remember Jesus said, well, they persecuted him and they've persecuted his followers as well. So don't be, uh, it's in trials that your faith, your character comes out. It's ironic that my mom, when I was a child, it's good to have good parents that are wise. When I was a child, because I was very sheltered by my family, right? My father, my mother, my environment, I was always protected, right? So I'd never seen any hardship. No parent who, if they can manage it, wants to have their child be exposed to hardship or anything just to toughen them up. But the thing is, for as human beings, it turns out that when you're exposed to hardship, right, it shocks our system initially, but when we overcome it, we become stronger. It's just like a child, right? A child that's learning to walk, right? They start by crawling, and the few steps that they try and take to walk and everything, they fall, they stumble, it hurts them, they cry, they get up. Eventually, their bones get hard and strong, and you see they get to walk. That they get hardened, and they become resilient and they can walk. So that's how life is. But when you have parents, the natural feeling of parents is to shield you from hardship, to protect you. So I guess my parents had shielded me a lot, but something my mom realized was, I wouldn't always have that protection. All right, there's only so much protection parents can give one, and maybe it's not even ideal to overprotect your kids. But something she let me do when I was a kid was read the Bible, study the Bible. She encouraged me to go to church, and I picked a church that I was interested in because I love learning, right? I think that's obvious now. My friends, anybody who knows me understands that I came to America because of learning, right? So she encouraged me to study the Bible. And as a kid, before I came here, as a teen, I'd already finished reading the whole Bible. I knew the Bible by heart. That I earned a nickname from my friends, even though I wasn't really so religious at the time. I had friends who used to call me pastor just because the way I knew the Bible so well, right? They'd call me pastor, right? And as a nickname, so she told me then that, look, um, I should never be afraid when hardship comes, right? Because that was her belief, and at least that was what she tried to encourage me with. And and she encouraged me with stories in the Bible that when hardship comes, I should believe that God is preparing me for something great. God is preparing me, building my character, right? That I should study the Bible and see people who became great in the Bible. They went through trials, hardship. Nobody wants to go to be enslaved and go to jail like Joseph and lose 13 years of his youth. That was what happened to Joseph, but it turns out providence was working behind the scenes. God was working behind the scenes and prepared him for to be prime minister, ruler of Egypt, second only to Pharaoh, right? Uh, Even Moses went through the wilderness for 40 years before he was called to go and deliver the children of Israel. Or the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul went through so much hardship, suffered a lot to plant churches. And so my mom would point this out to me about the Bible, that I should, that was what she directed me to. And she also knew history, because my mom at one time been a teacher. She was trained as a teacher, went to college as a teacher, but so she would talk to me about great people, that see great people. They go through hardship, whether it's Nehru, who was locked up in prison for 14 years before becoming prime minister. Of course, she wanted me to do well, but but at the same time, she wasn't praying for me to go through harsh trials or anything. But she'd already prepared me that if I ever go through hardships, I shouldn't be scared, right? So I should let my faith, show, and I should depend on God, and that is what I do. So let me get to the Bible verses that I wanted to share today, real quick. Again, I'm gonna have to show some dexterity here. So I will start with. Psalm 94, verse 20 to 23. Psalm 94, verse 20 to 23. So again, these verses are about justice and judgment, how God hates injustice. God hates an unjust judge. And for anybody who's suffering under abuse of the law, this is they can refer to these verses for encouragement. So Psalm 94, verses 20 to 23. Shall the throne of iniquity have fellowship with thee, which frameth mischief by a law? They gather themselves together against the soul of the righteous, and condemn the innocent blood. But the Lord is my defense, and my God is the rock of my refuge. And he shall bring upon them their own iniquity, and shall cut them off in their own wickedness. Yea, the Lord our God shall cut them off. So encourage yourself, right? And so next I will read from the book of Proverbs, Proverbs 21. Let me read 3 first, right? Proverbs 21, verse 3. Okay. To do justice and judgment is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. So God wants us to do justice and judgment. So God is referring to a judge here. Do justice and judgment. And for anybody who is before a judge, you can pray, you can have faith that there's also Proverbs 21, verse 1. I memorized this since I was a kid. It says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. So that's so some versions say it's that the judge's heart, right? The judge's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. So no judge, no king, nobody can condemn you if God doesn't let it happen, right? So God can still direct uh, any judge, anybody, right, any king to surrender to his will. So, and let me continue. Now I'm going to go to the book of Isaiah 10, 1 to 2. Isaiah 10, 1 to 2. Again, I am just maneuvering, right? 10, 1 to 2. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed, to turn aside the needy from judgment, and to make away the right from the poor of my people, that widows may be their prey, and that they may rob the fatherless, right? So those are judges who, hear stories of certain judges who are actually robbing, they're robbing people. Um, um, this is actually happening, judges who are robbing people. So, and then let me read from the book of Amos, chapter 5, verses 12 and 15. Yeah, I read a story about a judge who's under she's facing criminal charges. She had been using her power to rob the estates of poor people, the incapacitated, people who lack capacity, right? These guardianship accounts, and she had been extorting money from them, right? It's happening here in America, right? Several judges, right? So God hates that. God condemns that in the Bible. Today is Sunday, so I'm sharing my faith today. So this is the book of Amos 5, and let me go straight to 12. For I know your manifold transgressions and your mighty sins. They afflict the just. They take a bribe, and they turn aside the poor in the gate from their right. Okay? It's talking about bribes. Let me jump to 14. Seek good and not evil, that ye may live, and so the Lord, the God of hosts, shall be with you as ye have spoken. Right? Verse 15. Hate the evil and love the good, and establish judgment in the gate. It may be that the Lord God of hosts will be gracious unto the remnant of Joseph. And that's it. So I hope this helps. This is what I do. This is for my friend. It's a story I have to tell. There was this unjust judge, Judge James Bonifant, who falsified, committed fraud upon the court, falsifying um, court records, right, and wrongfully committing me, finding me incompetent to stand trial, wrongfully committing me to a psychiatric hospital where I didn't belong. I don't have a mental illness, and he misapplied. He abused the laws of the state of Maryland. Now, I was there and there was somebody who saw me there, right? And I was found not only competent to stand trial, but I was never given any medication. And the psychiatrist wrote that, no, I don't have a mental illness. So that's a wrongful involuntary commitment because I didn't want to be there. Under the law, you can only send somebody who has a mental illness in the state of Maryland to a psychiatric hospital, right? So the judge had to commit fraud upon the court in order to send me there wrongfully, right? Because he violated my rights. He tried to get me to volunteer. I wouldn't volunteer. It's only for some, you have to have proof that that person has a mental illness. There's no proof that I have a mental illness. The state of Maryland used falsified, fabricated records, starting with G.D. Ware's perjured emergency evaluation petition. He fabricated an emergency evaluation petition. I never got notice of that emergency evaluation petition. That was a violation of my rights. Under the law, if they file anything against you that's going to take away your life, your liberty, or your property, you're supposed to be given notice. You're supposed to given a hearing, right, to dispute it, right, tell the state that no, this is wrongful, right. And third, you're supposed to have an impartial judge, right, an impartial tribunal. I never had any of those things. My family was never aware. The state of Maryland instead conspired with an impersonator, fraudster Jide Iwari, to fabricate this emergency evaluation petition, and Judge Bonifant used it as a basis to involuntarily commit me wrongfully to a mental health hospital in Maryland. Fortunately for me, that was the grace of God. Those hospitals refused to administer any medication, and they also refused to commit fraud and say I had a mental illness. They still told the judge expressly in writing and verbally in my presence. First of all, Dr. Martin Brandis did so on July 31, 2024, told Judge Bonifant that no, I don't have a mental illness. That there were other people who saw that were there. If there was any mental illness, they would have seen it. They didn't see anything. And, he was also told again on June 25, 2025, that I don't have a mental illness. That was another doctor again. And, they told him the same thing, and they wrote it down that to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, Olurotimi Osha does not have a mental illness, does not present symptoms of mental illness. But the judge abused the process, committed fraud upon the court in order to obstruct justice. The evidence indicates that it was to obstruct justice in ongoing investigations regarding fraud and misconduct in the Department of Defense and Department of the Navy, and also to protect corrupt cops, the cover up for the misconduct of the rogue police who assaulted me, shot me in the head, leaving permanent scarring, permanently damaged nerves as well. My name is Olurotimi Osha. I just wanted to share these verses regarding, bad judges and how God hates bad judges and how God protects those who've been wrongfully accused. And I will keep you posted. Thank you.